There are multiple ways to enter purchases into QuickBooks. We'll start with entering cost of goods or other items that you purchase from a supplier, which is called a vendor in QuickBooks, by sending them a purchase order. Click on Purchase Orders from the home page, from the Vendor Center, or from the Vendor drop-down menu. Select a vendor by using the drop-down menu or by typing the first couple letters of the vendor's name. Use the Tab key to go to the next field. If you don't need to use a certain field, such as drop ship to in this case, you can leave it blank. Make sure that the template is on the one that you use for your company. To create a purchase order, you must select an item. Fill in the quantity. If you're using the Units of Measure feature, select the appropriate unit. The rate or unit price should populate automatically if you have the cost field filled in for the item in the items list. If you don't have the rate filled in, you can go ahead and fill it in as you're typing the purchase order. When you're done selecting all your items, you can preview or print it, send it to your vendor immediately, or select print or email later. It's important to note that purchase orders do not affect your financials until the item has been received. You can create an item receipt right from the purchase order window, or from the desktop or vendor center later, which is normally the case. If you record a purchase order and need to change or delete it, you can find the purchase order using the Previous or Next buttons at the top. You can then modify or delete the purchase order as necessary. To delete it, go to the Edit menu and select Delete Purchase Order. You can also see your purchase orders by going to the Vendor Center, finding the vendor, and double-clicking on the purchase order. After sending the purchase order to the vendor, you'll want to enter the items into inventory when you receive them. Sometimes items are received with a bill, and sometimes only a packing slip with the bill coming later. You can record either event in QuickBooks. Let's say we received the invoice with our order. Click on Receive Inventory with Bill. Select the vendor from the vendor field. When you do this, a window will appear letting you know that you have open purchase orders for this vendor and asks if you want to receive against one of them. Click on Yes. Select the purchase order and click OK. The fields are automatically entered from the purchase order that you wrote out. You can also enter any freight that is included on the invoice. Freight for inbound materials that go into products that you sell are considered cost of goods. You can either calculate a landed cost, spreading the freight over the raw materials or supplies that you purchased, and adjusting the rates accordingly here, or you can create a separate freight item pointing it to cost of goods if you want to expense it all up front. Talk to your accountant about which is best for you. If this purchase was for a specific customer, you can select that customer or job to track the purchase against the income for that customer. You can also select whether or not this charge is billable. We'll say that it is and show you how that's invoiced to the customer later when we cover income and customers. If you use class tracking, select the class. If there happened to be part of the order that needed to be expensed, rather than an item that was received, such as a sample, you can click on the Expense tab and add that to the bill as well. The Items tab is used for items that you have in your Items and Services list, typically those that you buy and resell. Expenses are any items that are charged directly to your chart of accounts, such as office supplies. Once you are done and the dollar amount matches the actual bill you received, click on Save and Close. If you've received the product but have not yet received the bill, the process is the same except for you select Receive Inventory Without Bill. Everything else is the same except that the Bill Received box is not checked. Then, once a bill is received, you click on Enter Bills Against Inventory, select the vendor, and the item receipt that you had received earlier. You can now enter the bill and any additional charges, and when you're done, select Save and Close. When you're ready to pay the bill for the purchase order and the items that you've received, go ahead and click on Pay Bills. Select the invoice that you want to pay, enter the date at the bottom, the method how you're going to pay it, and then select Pay Selected Bill. You can also apply any credits or discounts that you may have for this particular vendor. If you have specific questions about doing that, feel free to ask. Another method to enter purchases or bills into QuickBooks if you don't use purchase orders is to use the Enter Bills, Pay Bills method. This is suitable for recurring monthly bills such as your electric, telephone, and monthly rent expenses. You can, however, use it to enter purchases of your raw materials and cost of goods as well. This is also the best method to use if you want to manage your cash flow. In other words, track your upcoming bills or liabilities. You can enter payments at the time that they're due or even after the fact in QuickBooks using the write checks or enter credit card charges, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But they won't appear on your balance sheet or on any accounts payables reports. To enter bills to pay later, click on the Enter Bills icon on the home page. Select the vendor and fill out the remaining fields. The reference number is usually the invoice number. The bill due date will be automatically entered according to the terms that you put in for this particular vendor in the Vendor Center. Also, any recurring expenses or normal expense accounts that you use for this vendor will automatically appear. If this was for the purchase of a raw materials or an item that you typically buy and sell, click on the Items tab and select the item that you're purchasing. When you're done filling out the bill, click on Save and Close. Then, when you're ready to pay the bill, click on Pay Bills and select the bill to be paid as normal. You can also set up reminders in QuickBooks to remind you to pay the bills before the due date. This is done through Preferences and Reminders. In newer versions, the bills also show up on the new Calendar feature.